So, Cyberpunk, was it worth it? It's a complicated question, but for me, it was a resounding yes. I can't speak for the seemingly large portion of gamers who've experienced a bug ridden mess, but from my personal experience, I had the normal RPG experience occasional NPC animations and terrain issues, but overall completely fine. I'll go ahead and drop my slightly above average PC specs in the background so you have a reference on my gameplay experience. In the 50 ish hours I played it, I never had a single crash or a bug bad enough that forced me to reload. I was able to play in 1440p with mostly high settings, ray tracing off with DLSS enabled in balance mode, which kept me right around the 60 FPS mark most of the time. I did try to run ray tracing here and there, mostly for photo mode, and I have to say, if you have the ability to run it all the time, I highly recommend it. Not that the RTX 3080 is real. It's a myth. Get over it. It's like the Queen of England. So, with that in mind, just understand I can only review my personal experience, and I won't be including other people's experiences into my score. That being said, let's hop into it. No spoilers here, that'll be a separate video that should release with this one. First things first, we need to address what I see as the biggest issue this game had, that being expectations. This game built such an amazing hype around it that after playing it, I actually think it deserved. The problem, however, is that I think this game was absolutely one to look forward to. I was counting the days myself, but so many people built it up in their head as the next sliced bread that no matter what they got, disappointment was always going to be on the table. I think that in a lot of ways the game suffered from this. If a reviewer comes in expecting an 11 out of 10 experience, then even a near perfect experience is going to be a letdown. I did my best to come into the game with a level head, and I think I succeeded, but what I'm really trying to get at is that when you sit down to play Cyberpunk, just remember it's only a game. You can't expect it to be anything more than that. I avoided spoilers for this game like the plague, and I'm happy to say that led to a fantastic experience as I first loaded into a foreign world that, on first impression, I loved. I went with a nomad background, which meant I started out in the Badlands, giving me an outsider feeling in the city that really added to my immersion as B learned the city along with me. The intro series of events was actually one of the best I found in an open world game, as I was given enough freedom early on to not really understand I was playing through an introduction. Once the game really kicks off, though, oh boy, does it. I found it kind of hard to admit, but I'm not really sure I enjoyed the first 6 hours or so of the game. The best description I heard was from Luke over on the WAN show, in that it feels like a picture more than a game. And I felt like I wanted to live what was in front of me. I could feel how important it was, but I might as well have been staring at the Mona Lisa. I felt unqualified to understand its beauty. I also felt as though I was forcing myself to play the game because this review was important to me, so I did the best thing I could have done. I went to bed. I woke up in the morning, got a cup of tea, I had energy and fresh eyes, and it led to a whole new experience. I put the main quest down and I picked a goal. I was going to pay back my Ripper Doc Vic, who hooked me up with some sick upgrades early in the game on the promise of later payment. This meant taking whatever gig I could get and being a low-level merc. They weren't great, but I worked and I worked, building up my street cred and taking on bigger and bigger jobs. I never try to force immersion in games. Either I'm in or I'm not. But here I was. I felt like I was a part of Night City, and I was loving every minute of this struggle, scraping together every eddy I could. I occasionally dabbled in the main quest just to meet new people and open up new options, and boy did it ever. Paying back Vic felt enormously satisfying, but then I just didn't know what to do, so I picked some side story threads and started pulling. Before I knew it, I was riding out with Pan Am, exploring the red light district with Judy, and solving mysteries with Rivers. We'll discuss it in more detail in spoilers, but the long and short of it is that they made the game for me. I won't claim that they were the best characters I've ever encountered. They're no Mass Effect squad mates or Arthur Morgan, but I missed them when I logged off for the night. It's kind of hard to explain, but the endings of these story threads always hit me the hardest. They weren't always sad, but I was always sad that it was over. It really was the good old days effect rearing its ugly head. I didn't know what I had until it was gone. The main story was much the same for me. I found myself not really invested in it most of the time, as I felt the characters, V included, were just lacking development. And then I would hit some major plot point and realize that I shouldn't be expecting what you get in a movie or TV show where you watch them develop over the game. I was an outsider stepping into their world. These characters were already who they were always going to be. I just didn't know them. And as I did learn them and know them better and better, I understood the depth of their personalities and their characters. And in the case of the main character, I wasn't watching V change. I was V, and my own outlook was evolving. I generally try to be altruistic in games, and I like being a hero, but I found myself really embracing the ugly side of survival and the worst sides of human nature. There was plenty of opportunities to be a better person, but all too often I either couldn't forgive the person I had hunted for whatever they had done, or I was worried they'd come after me, which often ended in a bullet to the head. I was writing my own story and I wanted to be alive at the end of it. I think I was supposed to feel desperate, and I did. God, just writing this, I'm looking back on all my actions and my evolution over the game, and I think I might have turned out to be the bad guy. For a lot of the game, I relied on non lethal weapons, stealth, and my gift of gab to get through places, but looking back, I realized how violent I became once I didn't have to rely on being slick anymore. Once I got strong enough, once I had the power, I used it to get my way. It's hard to explain, but where in any other game at a point where speech failed, I'd reload and try again, or I'd try stealth, but here, if they wanted to fight, I was happy to fight. Sword or pistol, I was down to drop a whole building full of bodies to get where I was going. It was never trying to be the bad guy, but I think I became one while trying to survive in a bad place, and even now making excuses for it. What's that quote? The path to hell is paved in good intentions? This leads me into the ending pretty well, so let's talk about it. You'll get some choices leading into the final mission. To keep it spoiler free, I went with the one I thought I'd only be risking my own life, and that was true in a way, but I gave up too much in the end. I'm not sure if it was a good ending or not. The game certainly tries to tell me it's not. It certainly wasn't the one that left me happy, but it felt right. It felt like the canonical ending for the playthrough that I did, even if I suffered for it, but I think that's what felt right about it. So, to avoid spoiling anything else, let's get back to other aspects of the game. A huge thing for me was the score and the soundtrack. I'm generally a guy who leans pretty hard on fast travel once I've explored a world, but something about riding through Night City with my favorite radio station on just felt so good. I couldn't help but drive to places. 98.7 body heat flowed into the feeling of the game so well I couldn't help but fall in love with the feeling it gave me. On top of that, the score during the game melted into the world and bursted into the scene for combat in all the best ways. I'm actually listening to the soundtrack as I write this, and I promise you it'll become part of my normal playlist. There wasn't a lot of boss fights, which fits the game pretty well considering the enemy used more time than any one particular person. But the ones that we did get were fun. As I pulled on my katana and I went to work in a fast-paced action sections that reminded me, strangely enough, of Metal Gear Revengeance? Rising? I don't know, one with Raiden. Never played it. I just thought it was cool. I watched a lot of it. Not the point though. I had a sword. It was fast. It was cyberpunky. It was cool. I loved it. I will state that while I started the game on hard difficulty, I did turn it down to normal, and enemies felt more like bullet sponges than actually more intelligent and interesting foes. I'll give it a run through on hard for my second playthrough, but for now my recommendation is actually normal, which in most games it's not. And in all honesty, it just feels good until you get all kinds of overpowered, as any game should. Off the cuff here, because I forgot to write anything about it, I thought the stealth and quick hack aspects of the game melded really well to benefit each other, being able to turn off people's eyes, their ears, create distractions, shut people down, shut machinery down. I thought it all flowed very well with the aspects of the game that were put to the forefront. I thought it all blended very well. I thought it all felt very natural, and I enjoyed stealth. I actually stealthed completely through a couple of sections that I really, really enjoyed and felt good about. Moving on though, I did have some problems with the dialogue. While I liked how much of it was just part of the world and it didn't drag you into cutscenes, some of the time the options felt rather misleading, and I ended up coming across differently than I intended. And that obviously is very frustrating when I'm trying to be nice and I turn out to say something that makes me sound like a dick. I don't enjoy that. Another issue I have with the game is it seems to skip some of the best sections, playing them like first-person montages rather than letting us just play them. I like to think it was due to time constraints, but it happens to sections so early in the game that literally like in the first hour that I'm left to think it was an artistic choice, and it really detracts from the game. I feel like if I keep rambling, I'm going to start giving away the plot, so I'll just start with a summary and we can get into a real review in the next video. I consider creating individual criteria to score games on, but I feel like that's just a little too impersonal. It can be really unfair to games that are greater than the sum of their parts, so I'll just give you a simple 1 to 10 and an explanation of why I think this. From my experience, which was a 60 FPS, 1440p high with no game-breaking bugs, just shy of 50 hours, this game is a 9 out of 10 for me. There's a couple of things that kept it from a near-perfect 10 out of 10 experience, but I think that was a lot of the early game. It's a slow burn like most games in this genre. Not as slow as, say, Red Dead 2, but it's going to take a while to really sink into the world. I also think the fact that you really need to finish a lot of the things in the game to get the full experience does detract a little bit, but once you do finish it, it's it elevates it. It's kind of weird like that. I don't know. I don't know exactly how to explain it. You have to play it. The gunplay actually exceeded my expectations. It's fluid, the weapons feel like they have a really good punch to them, there's plenty of options out there for you. Melee is where it really shines. I love the fist fighting side missions, and melee weapons had a weight to them that I just loved. It's looking back on it now that I can really appreciate the world I got to take part in, and I'm excited to dive back in after a little break. Overall, I'm happy to recommend this game to any fan of the genre, and I think this is a great intro to anyone who's interested in open world RPGs. Join me for spoilers after this, once you finish the game yourself, so we can get into what made this game great. Alright, everyone. See you later. Why did I do that? I've never done that before. That was